loveliness had the huntsmen passed on their way to the hollow oak, and they had ample leisure to enjoy them, because the squire and his brother-in-law, being engaged in conversation, as before related, made frequent pauses, and during these the others halted likewise, and even the hounds, glad of a respite, stood still, or amused themselves by splashing about amid the shallows, without any definite object, unless of cooling themselves. Then, as the leaders once more moved forward, arose the cheering shout, the loud deep bay, the clattering of staves, the crashing of branches, and all the other inspiriting noises accompanying the progress of the hunt. But for some minutes these had again ceased, and as Nicholas and Sherborne lingered beneath the shade of a widespread beech tree growing on a sandy hillock near the stream, and seemed deeply interested in their talk, as well they might, for it related to Alizon, the whole troop, including Fogg, held respectfully aloof, and awaited their pleasure to go on. The signal to move was at length given by the squire, who saw they were now not more than 100 yards from the bank on which stood the hollow tree they were anxious to reach. As the river here made a turn, and swept round the point in question, forming, owing to this detention, the deep pool previously mentioned, the bank almost facing them, and as nothing intervened, they could almost look into the rift near the base of the tree, forming, they supposed, the entrance to the otter's couch. But though this was easily distinguished, no traces of the predatory animal could be seen, and though many sharp eyes were fixed on the spot during the prolonged discourse of the two gentlemen, nothing had occurred to attract their attention, and to prove that the object of their quest was really there. After some little consultation between the squire and Crouch, it was agreed that the former should alone force his way to the tree, while the others were to station themselves with the hounds at various points of the stream, above and below the bank, so that if the otter and her litter escaped their first assailant, they should infallibly perish by the hands of some of the others. This being agreed upon, the plan was instantly put into execution, two of the varlets remaining where they were, two going higher up, while Sherborne and Fogg stationed themselves on great stones in the middle of the stream, whence they could command all around them, and Crouch, wading on with Grip, planted himself at the entrance of Swanside Beck into the Ribble. Meanwhile, the squire, having scaled the bank, entered the thick covert encircling it, and, not without some damage to his face and hands from the numerous thorns and brambles growing amongst it, forced his way upwards until he reached the bare space surrounding the hollow tree, and this attained, his first business was to ascertain that all was in readiness below before commencing the attack. A glance showed him, on one side, old Crouch, standing up to his middle in the beck, grasping his long otter spear, and with Grip beating the water in front of him in anxious expectation of employment, and in front Fogg, Sherborne, and two of the varlets, with their hounds so dispersed that they could immediately advance upon the otter if it plunged into the river, while its passage up or down would be stopped by their comrades. All this he discerned at a glance, and comprehending from a sign made him by the old huntsman that he should not delay, he advanced towards the tree, and was about to plunge his spear into the hole, hoping to transfix one at least of its occupants, when he was startled by hearing a deep voice apparently issue from the hollows of the timber, bidding him "Beware!" Nicholas recoiled aghast, for he thought it might be Hobthurst, or the demon of the wood, who thus bespoke him. "What accursed thing addresses me?" he said, standing on his guard. "What is it? Speak." "Get hence, Nicholas Assheton," replied the voice, "and meddle not with them as meddles not with thee." "Aha!" exclaimed the squire, recovering courage, for he thought this did not sound like the language of a demon. "Unknown, am I? Why should I go hence, and at whose bidding?" "Ask no questions, mon, but go," replied the voice, "or it shall be the worse for thee. I am the boggart of the clough, and if thou bringst me out, I'll tear thee in pieces with my claws, and cast thee into the Ribble, so that thine own hounds shall eat thee up." "Sayest thou so, Master Boggart?" cried Nicholas. "For a spirit thou usest the vernacular of the county fairly enough. But before trying whether thy hide be proof against mortal weapons, I command thee to come forth and declare thyself. that I may judge what manner of thing thou art." "Thou'dst best let me be, ey tell thee," replied the boggart, gruffly. "Aha! methinks I know those accents," exclaimed the squire. "They marvellously resemble the voice of an offender who has too long evaded justice, and whom I have now fairly entrapped. Jem Device, thou art known, lad, and if thou dost not surrender at discretion, I will strike my spear through this rotten tree, and spit thee as I would the beast I came in quest of." "And which you would more easily than me," retorted Jem, and suddenly springing from the hole at the foot of the tree, he passed between the squire's legs with great promptitude, and flinging him face foremost on the ground, crawled to the edge of the bank, and thence dropped into the deep pool below. The plunge roused all the spectators, who, though they had heard what had passed, and seen the squire upset in the manner described, they had been so much astounded that they could render no assistance. But they now, one and all, bestirred themselves actively to seize the diver when he should rise to the surface. But though every eye was on the look out, and every arm raised, though the hounds were as eager as their masters, and, yelling fiercely, swam round the pool, ready to pounce upon the swimmer as upon a duck, all were disappointed, for even after a longer interval than their patience could brook, he did not appear. By this time Nicholas had regained his legs, and, infuriated by his discomfiture, approached the edge of the bank, and, peering down below, hoped to detect the fugitive immediately beneath him, resolved to show him no mercy when he caught him. But he was equally at fault with the others, and after more than 5 minutes spent in ineffectual search, he ordered Crouch to send Grip into the pool. The old keeper replied that the dog was not used to this kind of chase, and might not display his usual skill in it; but as the squire would take no nay, he was obliged to consent, and the otter hounds were called off lest they should puzzle him. Twice did the shrewd lurcher swim round the pool, sniffing the air, after which he approached the shore, and scented close to the bank. But still it was evident that he could detect nothing, and Nicholas began to despair, when the dog suddenly dived. Expectation was then raised to the utmost, and all were on the watch again. Nicholas, leaning over the edge of the bank, with his spear in his hand, prepared to strike, but the dog was so long in reappearing that all had given him up for lost, and his master was giving utterance to ejaculations of grief and rage, and vowing vengeance against the warlock, when Grip's grisly head was once more seen above the surface of the water, and this time he had a piece of blue serge in his jaws, proving that he had hold of the raiment of the fugitive, and therefore the latter could not be far off, but had most probably got into some hole beneath the bank. No sooner was this notion suggested than it was acted on by the old huntsman and Fogg, and wading forward, they pricked the bank with their spears at various points below the level of the water. All at once Fogg fell forward. His spear had entered a hole, and had penetrated so deeply that he had lost his balance. But though soused over head and ears, he had made a successful hit, for the next moment Jem Device appeared above the water, and ere he could dive again, his throat was seized by Grip, and while struggling to free himself from the fangs of the tenacious animal, he was laid hold of by Crouch, and the varlets rushing forward to the latter's assistance, the ruffian was captured. Some difficulty was experienced in rescuing the captive from the jaws of the hounds, who, infuriated by his struggles, and perhaps mistaking him for some strange beast of chase, made their sharp teeth meet in various parts of his person, rending his garments from his limbs, and would no doubt have rent the flesh also, if they had been permitted. At length, after much fighting and struggling, mingled with yells and vociferations, Jem was borne ashore, and flung on the ground, where he presented a wretched spectacle, bleeding, half drowned, and covered with slime acquired during his occupation of the hole in the bank. But though unable to offer further resistance, his spirit was not quelled, and his eye glared terribly at his captors. Fearing they might have further trouble with him when he recovered from his present exhausted condition, Crouch had his hands bound tightly together with one of the dog leashes, and then would fain have questioned him as to how he managed to breathe in a hole below the level of the water, but Jem refused to satisfy his curiosity, and returned only a sullen rejoinder to any questions addressed to him, until the squire, who had crossed the river at some stepping stones low